Hey guys, Julian here, and today I'm super excited to be showing you how to make Detroit-style techno. So, as usual, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because they'll be available. And yeah, let's get started. So, this is the loop you heard in the intro. We're at 125 BPM, and the first sound I have here is the string, which sounds like this. So what this is, it's basically a drone. It's playing the first chord in this chord progression, aka the root note, which is just D sharp minor, or A sharp minor actually, excuse me, A sharp minor. And what I've done here is I've actually taken the fifth and put it up an octave. So you can see this is the root note, this is the minor third, and then this is the fifth. I've just doubled that up an octave up, like I said. And what that does is it just kind of gives you the best of both worlds. Like you get the deep, kind of like lower strings down here, but then you also get that nice high note kind of like shining through. And the thing is, with drones like this, we're in a minor key, so you usually only would want to have, like if you were just going to have this be one note, like say you just wanted it to be like that, you would either have it be the root note or the fifth in a minor key like this. So that's why I went with the fifth there, because I just thought the root note would be a little bit boring. Like that's playing the root note A sharp, and yeah, it's just not super interesting. So I have it playing the fifth there. So then for the sound, the way that I made this was I took this string sample. I'll play you the original sample. It's that long sort of string, and then what I did was I made it endless using the simpler in Ableton's loop function. So what you can do with this is basically, you guys probably all know that this loop function is here, so you can loop a sample. But as you know, if you just loop a sample like this, what's going to happen is it will sound kind of choppy. Like you can hear that keeps restarting. So what you have to do is you have to use these start and these length things to kind of like get it however long you want it to be. And then once you use those, you can use this fade, and now you get a super smooth loop. So it's really just the key here is to use that fade. If you don't use the start and length to make it like how long you want, the fade doesn't do anything. Like even if I drag this over, you can see it's not doing any of the fade. So very important to just use that start and length to kind of like find the start and the length of how long you want the sample. And then the fade just makes it a smoother loop. So then after that, I've got one effect, and it is this reverb here. I'm just using it to give some space to the sound because it was just a little flat on its own. But I feel like the reverb kind of helps, like I said, just give it a bit more space and kind of make it fit in that part of the mix. So the next sound we have here is the bass, which sounds like this. So I'll show you the notes here. It's just playing this pretty simple kind of like pattern. It's just playing in the key, which is A sharp minor, like I said. Pretty simple, kind of like old school techno sort of bass loop, I guess. And yeah, so then for the sound here, I've got this FM sound. So I made this with Operator, and I wanted to make one of those kind of like juicy FM basses you hear in a lot of tracks by like Carl Craig and Juan Atkins and like those kind of guys. And yeah, so that's what I was kind of going for here. So basically, the way I made this was using a bunch of sine waves. You can see, yeah, we literally just have 4 sine waves FMing each other here. You can see I've got the envelopes on some of them kind of different. I'm just kind of set it so it's got that nice like pluck. And yeah, you can also see I put these two, I put those up an octave. Again, pretty simple, just kind of gives it that like deeper sort of FM sound. So then after that, I've got those going into this low pass filter, which you can see has an envelope on it, and I've got the frequency there. So here's what it sounds like without the filter. And then with it. So you can see it's actually extremely subtle. All it's doing is really just cutting off the high end like at the end of the sound. This kind of helps to just make it a bit shorter and a bit more plucky. So then after that, I've got a bit of chorus to kind of help give it some dimension and just give it more of that like juicy, sort of like watery FM sound. Here's what it sounds like without it. And then with it, you can hear, yeah, chorus sounds really good with these kind of basses, and it's really good for getting this kind of like bass sound. So then after that, I've got a bit of saturation, pretty simple. I've just turned the drive up a bit. This just kind of gives it more texture, makes it a bit bigger sounding. There's without it. And then with it, so yeah, pretty big difference there. And then after that, I've just got an EQ8. And with the EQ8, I actually did something a little bit weird that some of you will probably tell me not to do. But I actually boosted a bit of the low end because this bass wasn't super powerful in the low end, so I just gave it that little boost, and I feel like that really helped to like push it through. Here's what it sounds like without it. And then with it. And you can hear it. It's very subtle, but I feel like it's really helping because this is really the only thing that has like that deep sub in this mix. Like even the kick really doesn't have that. So I really wanted to just bring that out with this one. So that's the bass. The next sound we have here is the 303, which sounds like this. So the way I made this was using analog. I'll show you the notes. So it's just playing this thing. It's playing over the A sharp minor chord. You can see it's basically just playing like 16 notes, and then I've just switched some of these notes around. I just kind of played around with it. I actually made this last. So what happened was I had all of these things playing, and I wanted something else. So I just kind of wrote this around the groove of everything else, if that makes any sense. So yeah, it's actually really simple. These notes up top that aren't just A sharp here are actually just the fifth. Like I have F, and then I have another A sharp, so the root note, and then we just have the third, C sharp. So it's all just notes from the chord of this root note being kind of spread around the keyboard. Really not too crazy. I've got a lot of questions about writing 303 lines, and yeah, you can see it's really not that difficult. But anyway, so for the sound on this one, what I've got is, like I said, I use analog. I've got one saw wave, and that's going into a low pass filter. The low pass filter is what I'm using to get the kind of like 303 sound you can hear. And yeah, so what this is doing is I've got an envelope on there, which is making it kind of plucky, and then I'm automating the frequency of the filter as well as the resonance. So you can see I've just kind of got them moving, and you can see they're a little bit like kind of, I don't want to say they're playing off, I mean, they are kind of playing off each other, but you can see like when the filter opens, the resonance goes down, and then when the filter closes, the resonance goes up. So I recommend automating both the resonance and the frequency of your filter because, like, a lot of times back in the day when people were playing these 303s live for these specific kind of tracks, they weren't just, like, automating one parameter of a synth. They were just sitting there playing with the resonance and the frequency and literally any other knob they could find on the 303 to try to make it interesting. So, yeah, to really get that proper kind of, like, moving 303 sound, I feel like you got to automate both of them. So that's that. Then I got the amp envelope set like this, just like a simple pluck. And that's it for inside of analog. So then after that, I've got a bit of saturation. You can see I turned up the drive a bit, and then I kind of went in with the bass frequency on the analog clip as well. Here's what it sounds like without that. And then with it. So you can hear it really helps to give it that kind of like broken up, like dirty 303 type of sound. Then after that, I've got a bit of echo. And what I'm using this for is to just give it a bit more texture. Using like these really fast echoes like this is kind of a good way to get that like sort of old school sound. Like you can hear it's giving space to it. If I turn this off, it's very flat. And that's cool too, but I like the texture that this echo gives. It kind of sounds like a small reverb. Like I said, it's just like this very fast echo. It's nice for giving it that kind of like more organic, sort of like analog synth type of feel. So then the next thing I've got here is the drum group, which altogether sounds like this. You can hear for this style, the beats kind of need to be like not super complex. Like you don't want them to get in the way of the other stuff, but like we only have 3 other melodic things in this track, so the drums are definitely like pretty busy here. So I've got a bit of processing on the group, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the first sound I have here is this 909 kick, which sounds like this. So this is a kick from a 909. If you don't know, the 909 is a drum machine by Roland. I've actually used pretty much all drum machine sounds for these, which is kind of what you should. Like if you want this sort of like Detroit techno style sound, it's mostly, especially like the old school stuff, is mostly just a lot of like drum machine sounds, because that's what they were using back in the day. Like they had 808s and 909s and 606s and 505s, 707s. I could go on forever, but yeah, like all of these different kind of like drum machine sounds, even like a Linn drum or like, you know, something like that. Just any kind of like drum machine type of sounds I feel like are really what you want to be using for this. So that's what I've got here. Got this 909 kick, and then I've got it going into a bit of saturation. So here's what it sounds like. Dry. You can hear it's kind of thin. It doesn't really like punch through like that, but when we add the saturation, it really brings out that deep like low end. And not even like low end. Like if I put the spectrum on here, you'll see it's really mostly like, I guess it is like low end, but it's not like the super low subby frequencies. It's mostly around like 100 to 200 hertz, really, you can see. But yeah, it just really helps to kind of bring that out. And then I've got the drive up a little bit on that, like I believe I said, and then I've got the bass frequency up a little bit as well. Again, here's what it sounds like without that, and then with it. I just really feel like it helps make the kick punch through. The next thing I have here are these 808 hi-hats, which sound like this. So the way I made these is, you can see, I've just got these two hi-hat samples. We've got like a closed 808 hi-hat, and then like an open 808 hi-hat. And then what I've got them doing in here is basically, they're just kind of playing like this. They're just playing this pretty simple pattern. And then I've got this choke on here and this drum rack. So the reason why I want to use a drum rack for these is because you can set this choke thing, which basically says that when you play one sound, the other one will stop, which is very useful here, because you can hear with this long open hi-hat, you wouldn't want that to just keep playing out over the track. So I have it set up so when I play the closed one, it stops. It's kind of like when you're playing a real hi-hat, like you couldn't play a closed and open hi-hat at the same time because you'd have to close the hi-hat to play a closed hi-hat. So kind of like the same thing here, like just trying to get that little short like hit of the open hi-hat, but not like a super long one. Like if I turn this off, you can hear it's just kind of a mess. And it just gets way too loud. But yeah, it's just a nice way to kind of like keep it under control. So the next sound I have here is this little 808 snare, which sounds like this. So you can hear, this is just doing like pretty simple, like kind of percussion stuff. Nothing too crazy. I also have this 808 rim shot doing some kind of like percussion stuff like that as well. You can hear it. These are just kind of adding that extra sort of like, I guess you would call it like ear candy. Like it's just kind of like the extra little stuff in the beat that like helps to spruce it up. Like if we just had this with none of these, this would be a little bit boring. But when you have little kind of subtle things in there like this, it really helps to bring it to life. So on the 808 snare, I don't have any effects besides this EQ8. I just cut out a little bit of the lung, as you can hear. It's kind of tuned low, which is cool. I like that, but you can hear there's like that tone, and it's a little bit strong, like that frequency. So I just cut it out a little bit with this EQ8. So you're still getting that. It's just not coming through as strongly, basically. And then on the rim shot, nothing. I don't really have any effects. This is the kind of sound you just really want to have it be as like clean and pure as you can. So then the last drum that I have in here is the 606 snare, which sounds like this. This is the snare that's just playing on the 2 and the 4. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, if you're counting it that way. It's playing on the 2 and the 4. Really simple. It's just kind of doing that. The one thing I will say is like usually for like techno or house, you would want to use like a clap for this kind of stuff. For like the 2 and the 4, I guess. But with this style, I hear they use a lot of snares. So I definitely recommend trying like a 606, 808 snare, even a 707 or a 909. I want to use a 606 here because it's kind of small like the 808 snare. But I already used the 808 one there, so yeah. Just kind of a nice way to get that sort of sound. So then on the group, I have a very small amount of processing. All I have on here is just this drum bus. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually just using the drive and the crunch to kind of beef this up a little bit. You can see I turned the damp all the way up. By default, it comes like that, which you can hear cuts off a little bit of the high end. So yeah, I just turned that up. And then like I said, I'm just going to drive in the crunch. So here's what it sounds like without it. It kind of works, but you can hear like when I turn this drum bus on, I feel like that really gives like, it really helps to kind of like glue all the drums together. Like it's not doing any compression or anything. You can see I've got the compression off actually, but it's just one of those things that like when you put all the drums under the same sort of like umbrella of processing, then they're all going to sound like they're coming from the same place. And that's what it's doing. Like it's just kind of putting them all in the same world and helping to really glue them together and like bring it out in the track. And it also helps to give them a bit of like crunch as well, no pun intended, because like with this style, like part of it is kind of like meant to sound sort of like raw, like not necessarily raw, like super distorted or like even hard hitting per se, like distorted, like I said, but it is supposed to sound a little bit kind of like, I don't even want to say like DIY, like it's just supposed to sound a little bit analog, really. Like it's supposed to sound not too perfect and not too digital, and that's what this does. It just kind of helps to give the drums a bit of kind of like crunch and just a bit more life. So pretty much it for this one. I just want to show you guys some techniques. I hope you enjoyed. I got a bunch of requests for this one. And yeah, so that's gonna be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and make sure to like this video as well as subscribe and share the video so somebody else can see it. As usual, you get the project file and samples from this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because they'll be available. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.